Hello everybody, welcome back to Board Game Buzz. My name is Carly and today I've got a top 10 list for you because I know how much we all love top 10 lists. My top 10 list for today are 10 games I would recommend for new gamers, specifically those very new gamers that you might have in your life. Usually when I hear top 10 lists for new gamers, they are a bunch of really great gateway games. But today I really want to focus on recommending 10 games with 10 different types of game mechanics in them to help introduce new players to the different mechanics that are involved in this hobby. I actually went over onto BGG, which is Board Game Geek. I went over onto their website and I looked through their list of game mechanics. And I picked out the 10 that really stood out to me and I felt like I saw a lot in gaming. And then for each of those 10 game mechanics, I actually selected a game that I felt was accessible to new players, easy to understand, at a good price point, easy to get their hands on. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Let me just pull up my laptop here. So those 10 game mechanics that I personally felt were important for new gamers to understand and play and kind of get themselves familiar with are area control, co-op, deck building, dice rolling, party games, push your luck, roll and write, set collection, tile placement, and worker placement. And the reason why I felt like those mechanics were important was because for me personally, I feel like I see those mechanics in games very often. If you are a new gamer just kind of coming into the hobby, if you know and understand these mechanics and play games that have these mechanics in them, I feel like it will be easier to approach other games in the future moving forward because you know and understand these mechanics. So if you are new to this hobby or you have friends or family that you're trying to introduce to this hobby as well, these would be 10 games that I personally would recommend for you to try. So the first mechanic that we're going to talk about today is area control. Area control is a mechanic where players will fight for control over certain regions or territories. Usually the areas that players are fighting for control over are located on the board game itself, and it will benefit players who have the most control or majority on the board. I really love area control games. Something about them it's so fun to be fighting over certain areas and trying to gain the most control. My personal recommendation for a good area control game for new players is Mission Red Planet. In Mission Red Planet, you are quite literally fighting for control of Mars. You will have a hand of cards, each different characters with different abilities. You will select one of those cards, play it, and then do what it says. Most of the cards involve placing your astronauts on spaceships, which once the spaceship is full, it will take off and launch, and then place your astronauts onto certain locations in Mars. And obviously the goal is to try to retain the most control. The reason why I picked this game is because it is so stinking easy to learn. Lots of area control games, or at least area control games that I personally have played, can be pretty involved and a lot of rules and kind of small stuff you need to remember. Mission Red Planet is so easy. It is so easy and approachable. I've found when I've taught new players, literally I just have to do a really quick explanation of the game and boom, we can sit down, we're ready to play. And to be aware of in this game, which truthfully kind of like most area control games, but it can be very take that in the sense that you could be about to fill up a spaceship and then somebody changes up the game and then launches it before you're able to put somebody on it, or just the whole puzzle behind the launching of the spaceships is really what makes this game so much fun, and I think it's such a great introductory game to area control. So for all those reasons, that is why Mission Red Planet is my suggestion for an entryway area control game. The next mechanic that I wanted to talk about today is co-op. Co-op is short for cooperative board games. So everybody around the table is on the same team. Everybody is trying to work together. If somebody loses, everybody loses, but everybody can win at the same time. I don't know why co-op was such a fascinating idea to me. Again, maybe it was because I didn't play a lot of games growing up, but when I first kind of got into the hobby, one of the first games I actually played was Thanos Rising, which, if you're familiar with it, it is a cooperative game where everybody's working together. And I remember when I sat down and they explained that to me and they said, okay, we're all working together, I was like, wait, what? Like, what? Like, we work together? Like, we're all on the same team? That might not be revolutionary for everybody, but for some reason it was revolutionary to me. My personal recommendation for a co-op game that is accessible and good for new players is Horrified. This can be the original Horrified or the Horrified American Monsters. I think they're both equally accessible. In Horrified, you and everybody else around the table are collectively working together to try to eliminate the monsters that are terrorizing this town. The fun part about this game is the monsters that are terrorizing these towns are monsters that we are all very familiar with. Monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein, the Mummy, the Black Lagoon monster. And you are working together trying to save people in the town while trying to defeat the monsters at the same time. This is another one that is super, super easy to teach. I've always found that this goes over really well with new players and that they are able to very quickly kind of catch on to the game. Another reason why I enjoy this game so much is because it actually has a really great ability to scale the difficulty of the game. So if you want an easier game, you play with less monsters, and as you get better at the game and want to progress, you can actually slowly add in more monsters, therefore making the game more difficult. I love how every monster is unique and plays a different way, and in order to defeat them, it's very thematic. Like with Dracula, you actually have to go and find his coffins, and you have to break them. And with the Black Lagoon monster, you're kind of searching through the lake on a boat, and it's really thematic, and I feel like that theme really helps bring people into this game. So in my personal opinion, Horrified is a great game for new players and a great game to help introduce that cooperative mechanism into gaming for you. So the next mechanism that I'm going to be talking about is deck building. Deck building is a mechanic where players usually start with a hand of cards. Usually it's not a ton of cards that they start with. And as the game goes on, they are able to purchase or obtain more cards, slowly adding them to their hand, which in turn progressively makes them more and more powerful as the game goes on. There are so many games that I could have picked for this mechanic, but the one that I decided to go with was Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle. In Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle, the players around the table are all working together to try to defeat the evil forces that have come to defeat Hogwarts. And you did hear me right, this is another co-op game. Players each will take on the identity of a character, so like Harry Potter, Neville, Hermione. And in deck building fashion, you will start off with a very simple hand of cards. But as the game goes on, you are able to purchase new cards, which are usually like spells of some kind, which you are adding to your hand, making you more powerful as the game goes on. The cool part about this game is you are actually playing through all of the years of Hogwarts. So years 1, years 2, years 3, and so on. Each of the characters has a slightly different hand of cards. They have slightly different abilities. And so even if you go through and, let's pretend you're on year 5 and you play year 5. Technically, if you play year 5 again, just as a different character, you kind of have a different experience, and you actually need to kind of build your deck slightly differently in order to benefit your personal character the best. So it's a really great game to kind of help you understand deck building and to learn how to do it. As a huge Harry Potter fan myself, I absolutely loved going through all of the years and being able to defeat these characters and slowly kind of see these characters come into play that I was able to play as or I was able to play against. The next mechanism that I wanted to talk about is dice rolling. So pretty self-explanatory, basically rolling dice, and then you're able to do stuff based on the results of that die roll. I think Dice Throne is the perfect introductory game for new players. Now, the picture that I'm going to be throwing up and the B-roll that I have is for Marvel Dice Throne because that is the copy that I personally have, but any of the Dice Thrones work. In Dice Throne, you will select a character, which then gives you a set of dice, a playing mat, and a handful of other little tokens. You will take turns rolling dice, which then you will use those dice to perform certain combinations and moves and maneuvers, which then you will be using to attack your opponent. Think of it as Battle Yahtzee. Anyone who has played Yahtzee before or done any sort of dice rolling will know how to play this game. I love Dice Throne so much is because of those sets of cards that each individual player has that allows you to mitigate your dice or gives you special abilities or special power-ups. So it's not just strictly dice rolling, you're able to kind of mitigate that a little bit through the card play. Dice Throne is truly one of my favorite games. I love Dice Throne. It's just so addictive and fun, and I love a good dice checker, and Dice Throne just has all of that. So remember how I said that this list was 10 games long? I might have lied a little bit about that. And the reason why is because even though I love Dice Throne, absolutely love Dice Throne, I will never play it with more than 2 players. Ever. I made that mistake once. We had friends over and we all sat down to play and we're like, oh, we got a great game to teach you. It's called Dice Throne. It says you can play it with, more than 2. So let's sit down, let's play it. So we sat down and we played it, and it just did not work. It absolutely did not work. So if you are playing against, if you are playing a 2-player game and you want a dice checker, you want to introduce a new player to a dice game, I would 100% recommend Dice Throne. If you are in a larger group and you want to introduce new players to a dice game, my recommendation would be King of Tokyo instead. King of Tokyo is a fight to the death where you will be playing as a giant monster in the outskirts of Tokyo. You and the surrounding players at the table will be taking turns throwing dice and attacking the other players. This is definitely a king of the hill type of game. Last man standing wins. It's just the perfect type of game if you want to sit down with a group and just be chucking a bunch of dice. So there you go. Those are 2 recommendations for dice rolling games. Dice Throne is what I would suggest if you were just going to be playing a 2-player game, and then King of Tokyo for a larger player game. The next mechanism on the table is a party game. Party games are games that play great at large player counts. Those who are very familiar with the hobby, most games don't play well with a lot of people. But when you have a bunch of people over and you want to all kind of interact and play a game, a party game is what you're going to want to turn to. When I was making this list, the obvious first choice for me was Codenames. And then I thought to myself, Carly, you're better than that. Everybody picks Codenames. I have to pick something different. So another game that I feel like is a wonderful party game is called Ready, Set, Bet. Ready, Set, Bet is basically a horse racing game. So you and everybody around the table will be placing bets on horses that somebody will be running at the top of the board. As the player at the head of the table is rolling the dice, racing the horses, they're getting closer and closer to the end of the finish line, the rest of the players around the table will actually be real-time placing bets on those horses. It's played over 4 rounds, and whoever has the most money at the end wins. The reason why I picked this as a great party game for players is because of the interaction that it brings to the players around the table. This is the game that you'll be playing if you want people up and screaming and cheering and come on, number 7, I know you can do it, come on. I feel like there are many party games out there, I guess Codenames is kind of included in this, that are word games or letter games or don't say this word or try to get people to say this word, and those are fine, I guess, but Ready, Set, Bet just brings this energy that I feel like the others lack. For new players who are looking for a party game, my suggestion would be Ready, Set, Bet. So the next mechanic that I wanted to talk about is Push Your Luck. The way that I would define a Push Your Luck game is when you have a set of resources or cards or something, and you as the player are personally deciding how far you want to kind of gamble or risk. You can stop at any moment, but the further you keep going, obviously you have the chance to get a bigger reward, but you also have a bigger chance of failing at the same time. And the game that I'm picking for this category, I might be picking it because that's what introduced me to this category, but I still love it. It is Quacks of Quedlingburg. In Quacks of Quedlingburg, you will be playing as a quack doctor, as they describe it, and you will be reaching into your bag, pulling out ingredients, placing them into the pot. The problem, though, are the white cherry bombs. If you pull out too many cherry bombs and your value exceeds that of 7, then your pot will explode and then you'll be out. As the game goes on, you're able to purchase new chips, which then you can add to your bag. therefore making it more likely for you to pull out those different abilities or those better chips versus the white ones. And just that tension of, okay, do I risk it? Do I keep going? Or do I just play it safe and call it quits? That tension is just so palpable in this game. If you don't have Quacks of Quedlinburg in your collection yet, or if you haven't even played it, I would highly recommend purchasing this game, or at least trying it out to see if it's one for you. The next mechanism up on the list is roll and write. Roll and writes are usually small, portable games, not always, but usually small and portable, that involve rolling dice of some sort and then marking those results on pads of paper. Now, truthfully, I don't really play lots of roll and write games. Usually when I think of like, okay, it's game night, I want to play a game, roll and writes aren't really something that I immediately turn to, but I do enjoy them when I do play them. I just don't really think about it that often. However, there is one roll and write that I really love and I actually play really often, and that is Welcome To. Hello everybody, Future Carly here. Some of you out there may have already realized my mistake, but Welcome To is actually a flip and write game, not a roll and write game. For whatever reason, I always stick it in the roll and write category without realizing that it's actually a flip and write game. So when I was making this list, I obviously didn't correct myself before I filmed, and truthfully, I didn't have the energy to refilm once I finished. So I am acknowledging my mistake. Please forgive me. But yes, Welcome To is actually a flip and write game instead of a roll and write game, because you'll be flipping cards over instead of rolling dice. Please forgive me, and now let's get back to the list. In Welcome To, you are trying to design the most appealing neighborhood. And you do that based on 3 decks of cards that will be flipped over at random. Those cards that will be randomly flipped over in front of you give you a couple of options. So the first option that it gives you is a house number. You will be assigning house numbers to certain houses within 3 rows that are on your little personal player sheet. The next option that you can pick from the set of cards are certain abilities. Building a fence, building a pool, building a park. So you'll be looking at these abilities, pick a set that you'd like, and then consequently add them to your personal player board. The interesting part, though, is when you're placing house numbers, they don't necessarily have to be in exact order, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but they still have to be in numerical order, meaning it could be 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so you are racing the other players, trying to fill up your board, and basically just trying to figure out ways to score the most points. I actually mainly play this game on BGA, and one of the reasons why I love playing it on BGA so much is because of how seamless and how quick it is. The moment you, mark off a park or place a pool or create or complete an objective, those points automatically get scored for you, so you always kind of know where you're at with the other players at the table, versus in real life, you can kind of see where you're at, but it's definitely not as clear. So I love playing this game on BGA, and I would highly recommend it to all new players who are trying to get into the roll and write genre. The next mechanic that I feel like is important for new gamers to know and understand is set collection. So set collection is when you collect a set of cards which then score you points, and usually those cards that you're collecting are really only worth something if they are in a set versus being on their own. A great game that utilizes set collection, in my personal opinion, a great one to introduce to new players, is Trekking Through History. In Trekking Through History, you are playing as time travelers, and you will be spending time to go back in time and visit key historical moments that have happened throughout history. Once you spend the time required, you will then select that card and place it face up in front of you, adding more and more cards to it, creating a run. As you are collecting cards to put into long runs, you actually have to do so chronologically. So the moment that the cards available will not fit into your current chronological timeline, you actually need to push that set of cards to the side to then start a new one. However long your runs are will then give you points at the end of the game. But scoring your cards in runs is actually not the only way to gain points in this game. You will also be completing things to complete your personal itineraries that you get at the beginning of every round. So there's a handful of different ways to score points in this game, and we just love it. The very first time I played this game, actually, my very first thought was, I need this game so I would have a good way to introduce set collection to new players. So the next mechanism is one of my favorites, and that is tile placement. Tile placement is usually when you select a certain tile and then add it to your own personal gaming area. Sometimes those tiles that you select and then place will trigger abilities or give you more points. I love so many games with this mechanism in it. It's really one of my favorites. But the one that I always is my first tile placement to introduce to new players is Cascadia. In Cascadia, you are trying to create the most harmonious ecosystem. And you do that by selecting habitat tiles and animal tokens, which then you place on your personal player board in certain patterns that will then score you points. The fun part about Cascadia is every time you play, there are different ways that you can score your points. So for example, the bears, sometimes the bears only want to be in groups of 2. So when you place your bears onto your board, you only want to have 2 bears that are touching each other at a time. But then the next game, you could grab a separate bear card where bears want to be in families and they want to be in big groups of 4 or 3. So because of those cards, you're able to really change up the way you play the game each time, which is really great. Another reason why I love Cascadia so much is as the game goes on, your personal ecosystem in front of you is constantly getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, therefore giving you more and more and more options. It's such an interesting and a very pleasing, relaxing puzzle to do that I have yet to meet somebody who has not liked this game after I've introduced it to them. So that is my choice for a tile placement game, Cascadia. And the last mechanism that we're going to talk about today, which is my all-time favorite mechanism, that is worker placement. In a worker placement game, you will have a set of workers. They usually look like little meeples or little people. Every game is kind of different with the amount that you get, but you will get a set of workers. And in the game, you will then take those workers, placing them on the board, and then those workers will then activate, giving you some sort of ability. Very much like other games on this list, there are so many games out there that have worker placement, and there are truly so many games that I could have picked for this list. But the reason why I picked this game in particular was because I felt like it was really a true worker placement game. And I feel like by playing this game, if you are a new player, you will walk away from this game fully understanding and knowing what worker placement is. And that game is Architects of the West Kingdom. In Architects of the West Kingdom, you are actually playing as a royal architect trying to construct buildings and a cathedral for the king. Players in this game will have a set of, I believe it's 20 workers. You have a lot of workers in this game. And you will, like I described earlier, you will take your workers, place them on the board in order to gain materials, gain assistance, which then you'll be able to use all of those to build buildings and construct the cathedral. The reason why I love this game so much is because the more workers you have on a particular location, the more powerful you become at that location. So, for example, the first time you go to the forest, you'll set 1 worker down in the forest and you'll get 1 wood. But let's pretend a couple of rounds have passed and now you go back to the forest and you're setting your 4th person down there. Well, you'll actually gain 4 wood because you have 4 workers there. So as you are placing more and more workers on the board, you are actually becoming more powerful. But the trick is, other players around the table are equally becoming more powerful. So one of my favorite parts in this game is you are actually able to use one of your workers to go to a specific location. I believe it's town center. Might be wrong there. But you go there and you are actually able to round up other people's workers and throw them into jail. So if I'm sitting here and I see Jordan across the table playing and I notice he's getting really powerful at the mines, I might be thinking to myself, I don't like that too much. I'm going to round up his people. So I'll go to the town square, I'll round up his people, throw them into jail, and then I get a reward. I get money for that. So it's a really, really fun game, and I love it because it really is just a true worker placement game. That's really the only mechanic in this game is worker placement. Everything you do, it involves a worker. every single thing. And so for new gamers who are trying to become familiar with this mechanic, I believe that Architects of the West Kingdom is a great game to get familiar with. So there you have it. Those are my 10, I guess 11 games with 10 different mechanics that if you are a new gamer, I really think you should play to kind of help familiarize yourself with these new mechanics in gaming. I really, really love all of the games on this list, and I feel like they are really great and accessible and easy to learn for new players. If you have played any of these games before, please let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed them. And if you have any other suggestions, let me know as well, because I love hearing other people's thoughts and what they personally introduce new gamers to. And as always, to make sure you don't miss out on the latest board game buzz, please consider subscribing to my channel to be a part of this amazing buzzing community. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.